In 1998, 17-year-old Iwana Kaigan was in her bedroom when the phone rang. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. On the other end, her best friend's voice. "Come out with me tonight. Let's go to the club." Iwana agreed. At the club, everything felt normal at first. The music was loud, the floor was crowded, and Iwana was smiling as she danced. But then, 3 men began circling her. She tried to ignore them, but they wouldn't stop. Soon, their words turned into fists. They punched her. They struck her again and again. And the worst part? People stood there, watching. Even her best friend did nothing. Moments later, Iwana was forced into a white car, driven out of town, away from the lights, away from help, into a lonely, remote area where the real horror began. There, she was beaten so brutally that her entire body was covered in wounds. She was assaulted, and finally, strangled to death. The unthinkable betrayal. The person who lured her out that night, her best friend, was part of it all. By morning, Iwana's body was discovered. But justice? Justice never came. Because 14 police officers falsified reports, tampered with evidence, and buried the truth. Iwana never really got justice.
When you see chloroform used in movies, it knocks a person unconscious in seconds, but that's actually not how it would work at all. Chloroform is a potent but slow-working anesthetic. It would take at least 5 minutes to knock an adult unconscious, during which they could possibly fight off their attacker. And its efficiency depends on its dose, so if an attacker used too much chloroform, instead of just knocking out a person, it would overdose and kill them.
She had this bizarre fascination with Jeffrey Dahmer. She was obsessed with him and then went on to commit such a terrible, brutal murder that the media called her Lady Dahmer. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it for you guys. This is a horrific case and definitely not the video that you're gonna wanna eat during while watching. Taylor Schabusiness, that was her real legal name. Taylor Schabusiness was born Taylor Coronado and was raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin. From the outside, Taylor appeared to have a very normal, happy childhood and family, but throughout this entire case, that proves to not be so true. Sadly, Taylor's mother was an alcoholic, and it was really, really bad. Well, when Taylor was only 11 years old, her father woke up to discover that her mother had died in her sleep from cirrhosis due to her alcoholism. And after her mother's death, Taylor was really just in a downward spiral. Her dad remarried very fast, and Taylor was just very angry. She was rebelling, she was acting out and abusing alcohol and substances. She had a boyfriend in school named Shad Tyrion, who will be very important later in this case, and eventually Taylor was even expelled from high school because she was starting fights so often. By 19 years old, Taylor was in full-on addiction. She was using the substance M, like Beth with an M. Taylor actually married her M dealer, a man named Warren Chabot. And after she was married and went to change her last name, instead of taking her husband's last name and being Taylor Chabot, she legally changed her name to Taylor Schabusiness. Taylor Schabusiness. And as you can imagine, this marriage was extremely toxic and Taylor was just continuing down this downward spiral. In July of 2020, Taylor was arrested for resisting arrest and also battery of a police officer. Only a few weeks later, she was caught in a high-speed chase with police and refused to pull over and was arrested again. Taylor was in a really bad place, and to make matters even worse, she was pregnant at this time while still using M. At 23 years old, she gave birth to a baby boy. Her husband was unfortunately arrested for dealing and was in jail. Taylor really wanted to turn her life around for her baby, so she moved in with her dad and allegedly even got clean. But then 3 really, really bad things happened back to back to back in Taylor's life. First, she lost custody of her baby, and then she found out that her husband had been cheating on her before he went to jail. And then her own father was arrested for SAing a 13-year-old girl that was a relative of his wife, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Taylor Schabusiness was in a really bad, dark place, and she unfortunately relapsed and started using M again. She reconnected with her old high school boyfriend, Shad, who was also sadly using M at this time, so Taylor and Shad would use together and hook up. On February 22nd, 2002, Taylor and Shad were out partying and using with friends, and by all accounts, it was a normal, fun night. At some point, just Taylor and Shad went back to where Shad lived. He lived at home with his mom, and they kept using M and hooking up down in the basement. According to Taylor, Shad really liked it when she held him here on his neck while they were hooking up. Shad was wearing a chain, so she got on top of him and was pulling on the chain to restrict his breath until Shad was unconscious. Now, both of them were very, very much not sober. They had used a lot of substances that evening, not just M, so they were like using a combination, like a cocktail of really hard substances. Does that change anything? Does that excuse Taylor's actions, what she does next? I don't think so, but let me know your thoughts. So while Taylor is pulling on this chain that is around his neck, she said that it was really fun and cool to watch Shad's face turn colors. It went red, and then it went purple, and then it went blue. She kept pulling on the chain harder and harder. At one point, she said she watched Shad cough up blood, and then she said she could even feel his heart stop beating. And she actually said that this excited her, and she kept going and even pulled harder on the chain. And when Taylor realized that Shad was dead, that she just killed him, she wasn't upset, she wasn't freaking out, she had no remorse, no emotion. She actually SA'd his body after realizing he was dead for hours. She actually said that she was playing with his body. She then took a nap, and then when she woke up, she decided she wanted to take Shad's body home with her. So she planned to cut him into pieces in the basement of his own mother's home. While his family slept, she snuck up upstairs into the kitchen and she grabbed sharp kitchen instruments. First, Taylor took Shad's head and she put his head in a bucket, and then she cut off his manhood and also put it in the bucket. And then Taylor took a second nap, and then when she woke up, she cut Shad in half long ways, and then began putting pieces of him into different bags and containers and boxes. And she was still using substances throughout this entire process because she ended up being in Shad's basement for over 24 hours, and she was actually hallucinating at one point and believed that Shad's arm kept regrowing. Like she would cut it off and then it would regrow, and it happened multiple times. And when Taylor finally decided that she was going to go home, she brought pieces of Shad with her, but she forgot the bucket that had Shad's head and manhood in it. So tragically, it was Shad's mother that found his head. She found her son's head in the basement of her own home. She told investigators that her son was in the basement with his ex-girlfriend from high school, Taylor Shabiznes. So officers went to her apartment and they found her minivan in the parking lot, and there was blood on the outside of the minivan. Taylor's clothes and hands were also covered in blood, but Taylor had a fresh, full face of makeup, so she gave herself a full beat after everything I just told you that she did to Shad. And in her minivan, they found a leg and a foot. At the station, Taylor did confess, and she had an extremely bizarre interrogation. She just did not act the way you would expect a person to act. Taylor also couldn't explain why she did what she did. She said that she liked killing him, that it was exciting, that the entire thing was actually really exciting, and to check her undergarments if you wanted to see how exciting it was and how excited it got her. Taylor Shabiznes' trial was watched by so many people because no one could believe that any of this was real. Taylor's defense was that she was not guilty by reason of insanity, that long-term substance abuse literally changed her brain. During her trial, Taylor was seen laughing, like a lot. Also, completely out of nowhere, she got up and attacked her lawyer. One of the most infamous parts about this entire trial was the inclusion of Taylor Shabiznes' obsession with serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. She would lay in bed and take selfies with a photo of him next to her. She also made multiple internet searches regarding Jeffrey Dahmer, like Jeffrey Dahmer's butt and Jeffrey Dahmer walking all sexy into court. And because of how brutal and horrific her murder was and her obsession with Jeffrey Dahmer, the media actually coined her Lady Dahmer. It took the jury 1 hour to come back with guilty of all charges, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And this has been slightly controversial. It was even a bit controversial that she was even deemed competent to stand trial in the first place, but let me know all of your thoughts. I'm extremely heartbroken for Shad and his family. No one deserves to die like that, and no mother should ever have to find her baby like that. So definitely let me know all your thoughts in the comments, but while you're there, please make sure that you're respectful, because you have no idea who could be in the comment section reading. Someone that knew and loved Shad could be there, so please just be respectful. And while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that suggested that I cover this case. Have you ever heard of Taylor Schabusiness? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.
This makes me sick. Because they couldn't prove that she was being abused, they just let her get murdered. It was the 2nd of October 2023, and police in Topeka got a distressing phone call. The call reported that there was a young girl seemingly unconscious at a petrol station there. She appeared to be injured, but nobody could really say for sure what on earth had happened. This little girl was adorable 5-year-old Zoe Felix, and she was just absolutely like the sweetest little girl you could ever imagine. Her loved ones said that she just brought a little ray of sunshine into their lives. But Zoe wasn't your average child, because unfortunately she was having to be extremely independent because she was so neglected. When police raced to the petrol station, they didn't find the little girl injured, they found her dead. And obviously officers were at a race against the clock to try and unpick what had happened here. Now, Zoe had been living tragically in a homeless camp, which is just absolutely heartbreaking for such a little girl. There was this area where like homeless people lived. It was like their gathering. They were sort of living in tents there, and Zoe had been camping with her family. But this isn't just a case of Zoe's neglect going under the radar. It was very much a known thing, not only to members of the community, but also social services. Child Protection Services received countless reports about Zoe's well-being, with 6 of those assigned to be so serious they required further investigation. The year before, documents stated poor conditions in the home and possible substance use in the presence of a child. This was before Zoe was even in this homeless camp. It was actually social services, or the American equivalent of social services, who reported that she was living in a house covered in dog feces, and her basic needs weren't even being taken care of by her mum. Neighbours even told them that Zoe often wandered around the neighbourhood at a loose end, and she was dirty, she clearly wasn't being washed, she didn't look fed, and it was the neighbours that were all having to kind of like band together to A, report this to social services, but B, clothe her, wash her, feed her. And shockingly, Zoe's own mum had been arrested for driving under the influence while Zoe the child was in the car. But the mum was arrested and Zoe was just handed back to the family a couple of hours later. So just a month before Zoe was killed, her family were investigated again and deemed that their living conditions were fine. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't consider living in a tent in a homeless camp good conditions for a child. They were like, oh, it seems fine. There's no kind of proof that she's unhappy or not being taken care of. When Zoe's body was found, she was deemed to have been AR'd and then murdered. And it's honestly just sickening because this was from somebody she knew and looked up to. This was 25-year-old Michael Cherry. He was also homeless and living very, very close by to the family, and the family were apparently friends with him. She even called him Uncle Mike. And he actually tried to concoct some bizarre story to police when police tried to question him about this, lying that he'd seen another guy attacking Zoe, but then he ultimately had to admit that that was a lie because they had CCTV footage that proved this never happened. He finally admitted it. He said he had suffocated her with a pillow at the homeless camp. God knows where her parents were. Zoe's own dad had apparently just left her at the campsite with this Michael at roughly 1 p.m. and she was dead by 5:45. Thankfully, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, but what do you guys think of this? Because I honestly feel like that family is just as to blame as the guy who actually did this, because who just leaves their child like this? Who abuses them and neglects them for that long?
This Amish mother drowned her 4-year-old because she thought she was supposed to give him to God.
I gave him to God.
You gave him to God?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I threw him in the lake and I gave him to God. And people are going to tell me I am crazy, but he is real. And he loves you. He really does love you. He loves you.
This is an extremely sad case. It's also very recent and still ongoing. 40-year-old Ruth Miller, her husband Marcus, and their 4 children were a part of an Amish community in Ohio. At some point, both Ruth and Marcus both allegedly developed spiritual psychosis and religious delusions. They believed that God was speaking directly to them and that God was commanding them to prove their faith. On August 23rd, 2025, so not that long ago, 911 got a call that a woman drove a golf cart into a lake with at least 3 other people on board. Responding officers at first were hoping that this was just an accident, that someone accidentally drove this golf cart into the lake, but there were a lot of witnesses that were reporting that this woman was driving this golf cart very erratically, very dangerously. At one point, she was driving the golf cart on only 2 wheels, and also at one point flipped the golf cart. When officers arrived at the scene at Atwood Lake, they met Ruth Miller, who told them that she threw her 4-year-old son Vincent into the lake because she had to give him to God. She also had some other tragic info for the officers. Here's that clip now.
I gave him to God.
You gave him to God?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I threw him in the lake and I gave him to God. And people are going to tell me I am crazy, but he is real. And he loves you. He really does love you. He loves you. And I doubted him. I doubted him so many times. But I am to tell you, he is coming soon. He is coming very soon. Prepare your hearts. The end is close. And I'm for sure supposed to tell you that he does love you. Okay.
Ma'am, can you explain to me what happened? Who did you throw in the water?
I gave my son to God.
Your son?
Yes.
Where's your husband?
He went for a walk this morning.
And you haven't seen him
He
since?
didn't ever come back. And we went to the boat and his clothes were there. And God told me he's in the lake and a fish swallowed him. And you're actually supposed to go look for him in the bottom of the lake. And you will find the fish, and you will find my husband, and then you will believe. But ye of your little faith that did not believe before seeing.
Okay.
So send people down to the bottom of the lake looking for a fish that has my husband.
How old's your son that's in the lake?
4. He's sweet. I love him. I gave him to God.
Okay. 7940 Central. We're out with the mother. She is advising that she threw her 4-year-old son in the lake to give him to God.
I need to know where your husband's at.
He's at the bottom of the lake in a fish.
He's in a fish.
Yes.
There's no fish large enough on an Atwood to swallow your husband.
He's at the bottom of the lake in a fish.
Okay.
I thought your husband went for a walk.
Yeah, and then we came to the boat, and his clothes were laying in the boat.
Okay.
Tan
Yeah.
pants and cream shirt and flip-flops.
Well, we really need to verify your husband's still
Right.
with us.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, he's actually just go out in the bottom of the lake.
Well, I can't go in the bottom of the lake. So
Do you
we
have
need.
scuba divers?
Yeah, we're gonna have to call divers in to go to the bottom of the lake.
Please do.
And you're saying
Get the best ones there are, because this
So-
is a miracle from God, and you will see. You will see.
your 4-year-old son's down there too?
He's with God.
Where's his body at?
Yes, you heard that right. Not only did Ruth say that her 4-year-old son was at the bottom of the lake, but that her husband was also at the bottom of the lake in a fish. So he's like Jonah from the Bible. Ruth and Marcus had both been having these religious delusions, believing that God wanted them to prove their faith. Hours earlier, both Ruth and Marcus were down by the lake trying to complete these tasks that they thought that God was giving them. Allegedly, Marcus was not happy with how he did in these tasks, and he walked back down to the lake and he never came back. Around 8 a.m., Ruth brought her 4-year-old son Vincent down to the dock and she threw him in the water. And then later that day, Ruth loaded her twin 18-year-old sons and her 15-year-old daughter onto a golf cart and drove them all into the lake, attempting to allegedly kill all of her children and use them as religious offerings. In body cam footage, Ruth genuinely seems like she believes what she's saying. At one point, she's praying for the paramedics. She's asking God to give them all a sign that what she's saying is true, because she can tell that everyone doesn't believe her.
I'm gonna go somewhere where it's not too hard on my knee.
So your knee won't hurt you. Please trust me.
Okay.
It won't hurt you.
Okay.
It won't hurt you. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. God, please show this woman that it is true what I'm telling you. People are doubting. It is getting harder for me to stay strong. Please show me that it is true what I'm telling you. That there is a fish in the bottom of the lake.
Tragically, divers did find the body of 4-year-old Vincent in the lake. The body of Ruth's husband, 45-year-old Marcus, was also found in the water the next day. He was not in a fish. And Ruth Miller has been arrested and she's been charged with 7 different charges. Those charges are murder, aggravated murder, and felony assault for the death of her son. She was also charged with child endangerment for driving her 15-year-old daughter into the lake, and also 3 counts of DV for driving all 3 of her children into the lake. And I'm honestly shocked that she wasn't charged with attempted murder. The church that Ruth and her husband belonged to, the Old Order Amish Church, have since released a statement saying that they blame Ruth and Marcus's actions on mental illness and are adamant that their beliefs do not align with their church's beliefs or their religious preachings. Ruth has pled not guilty by reason of insanity and bail has been denied. She will have her next court hearing next Monday on October 6th. And I will be sure to keep you guys updated, so make sure that you're following along. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and I feel like there's been such a rise in religious psychosis and delusions. Now more than ever, I think it's so important to really look out for each other, and if you see something, say something. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments. While you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that suggested that I covered this case, and I will see you guys all next time I make next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.
Over the years, I've researched so many true crime cases and I shared them with you all on here. But the one question that I get asked over and over again is, what is the most disturbing and chilling case that I've ever come across? They're all horrible, but the one case that has never left my mind after reading about it is the horrific murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom, mainly because they were a couple just going about their day until they were carjacked by 4 men. What this couple endured inside this house over a period of a few hours is depraved and sickening, and it's honestly something I will never forget, especially when I'm outside alone near my car. I think it's important to talk about them because this could happen to you. It's something that they thought would never happen to them, but it did. I want to warn you though, the details in this case are very disturbing and centers around SA, so if that's something you can't handle, please protect your peace and don't watch this. With that being said, let's talk about one of the worst and most inhumane cases I've ever heard of. This is Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. They were a really happy couple who lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. Shannon was a 21-year-old senior at the University of Tennessee. She was incredibly smart, majoring in sociology, and she was known to be a very loving soul. She was about to graduate at the end of 2007, but sadly, this was all ripped away from her. At the time of her death, she was dating 23-year-old Christopher Newsom, who was a really talented baseball player. At the time of his death, he was a carpenter, and those who knew them said that they were such a fun and happy couple who really cared for each other. On the evening of January 6, 2007, Shannon and Chris had planned to go to dinner together and then to a friend's birthday party. party. So that afternoon, Shannon went over to her best friend's house at the Washington Ridge Apartments to get ready for a fun night ahead. At around 8 p.m., her friend left to go to said party, but Shannon stayed behind to wait for Chris as they were going to ride to the party together. But that night, Chris was running a little bit late, which kind of irritated Shannon. Eventually, Chris did arrive though, and as they were getting into Shannon's car, Chris leaned down to kiss her. Little did they know though, was that they were being watched by these 4 men: Latolvis Cobbins, Lamarcus Davidson, George Thomas, and Eric Boyd. These 4 men had been living together for just a few days leading up to this event, along with one of their girlfriends, Vanessa Coleman. They all lived in Lamarcus's house at 2316 Chipman Street. None of them had a job, a car, or any money, and tensions were really rising in this household because they were drug dealers, and they owed their dealers some money, which none of them had. So they concocted a plan to carjack a random person, maybe rob them, but then use their car to deal drugs and make some money. That night, their sights landed on Shannon and Chris. So as Chris leaned in to kiss Shannon, the 4 men ambushed them. But instead of just robbing them and taking their car, things escalated and quickly. They forced Shannon and Chris into the back of her Toyota at gunpoint, tied them up, and then drove them to Lamarcus's house on Chipman Street. This is when the nightmare and gruesome acts really began. Once at the house, they separated Shannon and Chris, Shannon in the bedroom and Chris in the living room. They then Chris with an unknown object, and he was then SA'd by at least one of the men. Lamarcus and Latolvis then took Chris to some nearby train tracks, only wearing his shirt and underwear, and then they forced him to walk barefoot across the rocks and the tracks. They walked him like a dog, tying him to a dog leash, and unbeknownst to Chris, he was being forced to walk to his death site. Once at a secure location, they bound Chris's hands behind his back, and they tied his legs together with his own belt. He was blindfolded with a bandana and gagged with a saw, and then he was shot twice. Once in the neck and once in the back, but somehow he survived this. This really angered the men, so Lamarcus then put the gun right up against his head, above his right ear, and shot him once more, execution style, in the head. This killed him instantly, severing his brainstem. The men then wrapped his head up in a sweater, tying it around his neck with shoestrings, and then they went back to the house on Chipman Street to wash their bloody clothes. But they didn't stop here. They then returned to the scene of the crime, wrapped Chris's body up in a blanket, doused him with gasoline, and then set his body on fire. Then they once again went back to the house where Shannon was still being held captive and proceeded to cause even more harm. Over the next few hours, all 4 men repeatedly beat and severely SA'd her. She sustained severe head trauma and horrific injuries to all of her private areas and mouth due to the SA. Evidence shows that she had been SA'd repeatedly by all 4 men and with an unknown object. According to the medical examiner, the assault she suffered was extreme and unlike anything he had ever seen. Shannon had been tied to a chair and orally abused, and it was so extreme that a membrane in her mouth was severed. The 4 men, and even the woman that was there, Vanessa Coleman, all promised to let her go if she just agreed to let them do whatever they wanted to her. And during this entire assault, Lamarcus stated that Shannon repeatedly said, quote, "I don't want to die." End quote. After the assault, Vanessa beat her to the point of severe hemorrhaging to her head and groin area, and Shannon had carpet burns and bruises all over her body. This lasted for hours. Hours of this, but Shannon somehow managed to survive this. What I'm about to say sticks in my mind the most when I think about this case. While Shannon was still alive, the 4 men and Vanessa decided they needed to somehow destroy the DNA evidence left behind, so they poured bleach down her throat and scrubbed her body with it. They then hogtied her in the fetal position with her head forced down to her knees, which were tied to her chest. They did this with curtains and some of their bedding. Her face was then tightly covered with a small trash bag, and then the men wrapped her body with 5 more garbage bags before placing her upside down in a garbage can in their kitchen. They then covered her with sheets and let her slowly suffocate to death. Shannon died after hours of torture and not being able to breathe. What's so heartbreaking to think about is that while she was slowly suffocating, Lamarcus, who was the group's ringleader, left to go hang out with his girlfriend. But not only that, he also gave his girlfriend some of Shannon's clothes. He also took Chris's phone and wore his shoes. So outside of this house, Shannon and Chris's friends started to worry. They never showed up to the party, and at around 12:45 a.m. the night they were kidnapped, Shannon was forced to call her dad in the presence of her killers, and after being horrifically abused to make it look like nothing was wrong. But after this, all calls and texts to the couple would go straight to voicemail. So Shannon's friends went back to the apartment complex where they were kidnapped from, and they found Chris's truck in the parking lot, but Shannon's 4Runner was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Shannon never showed up for work, which was highly unusual for her. She ignored all of her mom's texts and calls, which was also not normal. This is when their families tried reporting them missing to the Knoxville PD, but since they were both adults, they were told by police that it was too soon, and they would need to search for the couple by themselves. So they got to work searching every hospital and places alike, and then they went to Shannon's phone company, and they found that her phone last pinged at a Cherry Street phone tower. Their family and friends searched all along Cherry Street and in the neighboring areas all night long, until 2 a.m. on January 8th hit. This is when they found Shannon's 4Runner completely abandoned. It was clear that something was very wrong because several items were missing from the car, including a special teddy bear, some pictures that Shannon always kept up, her iPod, and her phone charger. The front seats had been pushed all the way back, which meant that Shannon wasn't driving because she wouldn't have been able to reach the pedals, and the floorboards were covered in mud. Shannon always kept her car super clean. On top of this, Shannon had some really cute stickers on the outside of her car, and they had been there for a really long time, but now they were mysteriously gone. But two things in the car caught her family's eye. One was a pack of Newport cigarettes, which neither Shannon or Chris smoked, and another was an envelope that didn't belong to them. This is when they went back to police to inform them of what they found, and after analyzing the envelope, they were able to find a couple of fingerprints. These fingerprints traced back to LaMarcus Davidson, who lived at 2316 Chipman Street, and this was only 2 blocks away from where Shannon's car was found. When police went to his home, no one was there, but they sadly found Shannon's body in the kitchen garbage can. LaMarcus's and LaTalvis's fingerprints were found on the garbage bags wrapped around her body, and LaMarcus's male DNA was found in her private area. LaTalvis's male DNA was found in her mouth. On top of this, several items belonging to Shannon and Chris were found in the house, including her purse, some of her clothes and shoes, her camera, and the pictures from her car which had been ripped and burned, and Chris's driver's license. Again, LaMarcus's DNA was all over these items, and both his and LaTalvis's male DNA was found all over her clothes. This was already pretty incriminating enough, but then police found shell casings at the house that matched the bullets used to kill Chris, which then leads me to the next horrific discovery. Not long before this, Chris's body was found on the train tracks by a railroad employee. Male DNA was also found all over his body, but it was destroyed by the fire. So once this all came to light, a massive manhunt for LaMarcus ensued. Authorities found messages and phone calls between him and Eric Boyd, so they reached out to Eric for more information. Eric told them that they needed to go to this abandoned house to find LaMarcus, and surprisingly, they did find him there. This was on January 11th, 2007, so 4 days after the killings. Police found LaMarcus wearing Chris's shoes, and he was also in possession of the gun used to kill Chris, so needless to say, he was quickly arrested. He told the police so many different stories, ranging from not even knowing what happened, to being informed by LaTalvis and George that they carjacked the couple, and then seeing them tied up in the back of Shannon's car. Even though Shannon was found deceased inside his own house, he denied doing it and SAing her, even though the DNA evidence literally proves otherwise. He basically just said that he only used her car to deal drugs and didn't want any part in the murders. But this was also a lie, and it became clear almost immediately that he was the ringleader of this whole event. Later that same day, LaTalvis, George, and Vanessa were also all arrested. And what's super creepy to me is that police seized their computer as evidence, and they found that they were all watching news coverage of the murders. They also found Shannon's purse with Vanessa. LaTalvis denied taking part in the SA, but Vanessa pretty much confessed everything, even to her being in the home when the murders were committed. She did lie about one thing though. She told police that she was only there because she was also being held hostage, which was a flat-out lie. So all 5 people had separate trials. The 4 men were charged with kidnapping, robbery, SA, and felony murder, while Vanessa was charged with facilitating the crimes. LaMarcus, the ringleader, was sentenced to death by lethal injection, although as of today he is still alive. LaTalvis was sentenced to life in prison without parole. George was originally sentenced to life in prison without parole, but he agreed to testify against Eric Boyd in 2018 in exchange for a lesser charge of second-degree murder and only 50 years in prison. And it took 11 years, but in 2019, Eric was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Vanessa was ultimately sentenced to 53 years in prison, but this was lessened after a lengthy legal battle and multiple retrials. They each got a retrial because the original judge in the case, Judge Richard Bumgardner, was later forced to resign after it came to light that he was addicted to drugs and would often buy prescriptions from convicts. He would also trade legal favors for sex, and this was all taking place during the trials for the murder of Shannon and Chris. In fact, the judge was even seen nodding off in one of the trials. So because of this, they were all trial granted a retrial, which really only affected Vanessa and lessened her sentence to 36 years with time served. She is due to be set free in 2036. What these people did to this couple is horrific, but it got even worse at their trial. At Eric's trial, he turned around, faced Shannon's family, smiled at them, and mouthed the words, "Bring it on." What makes me so angry is that these men shouldn't have even been walking free to begin with. They all had multiple prior felony convictions, especially LaMarcus. Right before the murders, he had just gotten out of prison for a carjacking and a series of robberies. It's just crazy that this even happened in the first place. In 2008, the house where this all took place on Chipman Street was demolished, and a memorial for the couple was put up in its place. Since this senseless tragedy, there have been foundations set up in Shannon and Chris's names, as well as 2 new laws as a result of this case. I feel like the details of this case are so disturbing that my mind can't even comprehend it, and it's really scary to think that this was completely random. One minute they were here, just going about their lives, and the next they were gone. But it's now been 18 years, and that horrific night and what happened to Shannon and Chris lingers on.
Netflix kind of lied to you. This is the real story of the woman that Addison Rae plays in the new Monster series, and I think it's more terrifying. It's October 1953 in La Crosse County in Wisconsin. Evelyn Hartley was a beautiful 15-year-old girl who worked as a babysitter in the local area. Now, she looked nothing like Addison Rae. I mean, Addison Rae looks absolutely great in the series, but I don't think she looks anything like her. She was a sophomore in high school, and she was the daughter of a biology professor. She was a very, very responsible girl, very intelligent, wise beyond her years. She was very kind, very caring, and made the perfect local babysitter. But on October the 24th, she went round to a family friend's home to babysit. This was the Rasmussens, and they had a little daughter and a slightly older daughter, but they were going somewhere that evening with the older daughter. So Evelyn was just left to look after the baby. And she was only 20 months old, so that just shows the trust that these people were putting in 15-year-old Evelyn. But bizarrely that night, she totally vanished into thin air. Very, very weirdly, when they returned, they entered the home, nothing looked amiss, but the little baby was just lay there in the bedroom on her own. There was absolutely no sign of Evelyn anywhere. All the police found in the home when they were eventually called was one of Evelyn's shoes and her glasses in the living room. This obviously led police to believe that she hadn't left of her own accord. Who leaves without one shoe? Then crept round the house and found eventually the other shoe. So this was looking really concerning at this point. Why had there been potentially a struggle where she'd lost both of her shoes? Disturbingly, they also found blood on the floor outside. This was obviously terrifying. Evelyn definitely didn't do anything to herself. Somebody had to come into that house, take her, and leave the baby. Thousands of local people joined in on a search. They were really absolutely horrified, the local community, about this. They couldn't understand who would have done this and why. Disturbingly, no sign of her was ever found. Like the new Monster series showing that Ed Gein murdered her with absolutely no evidence to suggest this happened. Ed denied having anything to do with her disappearance, and no DNA evidence ever linked him or his home to the crime. For now, it remains a chilling mystery, and probably the most scary part of all of this is if Ed didn't do it, who did?
This pathological liar faked a pregnancy and then murdered her friend so she could steal her baby from her stomach.
Found the woman this morning on the side of the road, and her baby has been removed from her body, and then you show up with a baby.
Taylor Morton Parker grew up in Mount Pleasant, Texas. She had loving parents and a good, normal childhood. And from the outside, Taylor seemed like a well-rounded kid. She was a cheerleader, she did sports, she got good grades. But if there's one thing that you need to know about Taylor, is that she is a compulsive, pathological liar. And this began when Taylor was as young as 8 years old. She told her classmates that she had cancer, that her parents were in the mafia in Mexico. In high school, Taylor is still telling people that she has cancer and other really serious health problems. She would bring bring crutches to school that she did not need. She created a bunch of fake social media profiles so she could catfish her classmates. She would also tell everyone about her boyfriend that went to a different school that did not exist. And at this point, Taylor is only 14 years old and she starts telling people at school that she's pregnant. Taylor actually faked multiple pregnancies while in high school. And for some reason, she really wants to get pregnant, and at 17 years old, Taylor actually does get pregnant. The father was some teenage boy that wanted nothing to do with fatherhood, so at 17 years old, Taylor gave birth to a little baby girl. She dropped out of high school and was now a single mom. But Taylor wasn't single for long. She starts dating this guy named Tommy, and by 18 years old, they were married. And all things considered, Taylor is in a pretty good place at this point. Tommy seems like a pretty stand-up guy, but the lies, manipulation, deception do not stop. And Taylor treats her new husband, Tommy, like shit. She treats him terribly. She's still lying. She's creating like this entire fake life for herself. She told Tommy that her family was really powerful, but they were also like really terrible people, like in the mafia or whatever, but also that her family was incredibly wealthy, and one day Taylor would inherit like millions of dollars. Taylor also continued faking lots of really terrible illnesses so she did not have to work. So Tommy was the sole supporter for himself, Taylor, and Taylor's daughter. When Taylor was 21 years old, she got pregnant again. This time she had a son, and after this she also got her tubes tied because she did not want to have any more children. And a little while after this, Taylor got actually sick for real this time. She had a surgery where a doctor performed an emergency hysterectomy, which means like they removed her uterus. So at this point, Taylor 100% will never get pregnant ever again. It's impossible. And Taylor also had a pretty serious weight loss surgery, and then after this, she starts feeling more confident, but then she starts ignoring and neglecting her husband and 2 children. She was always out clubbing and cheating on Tommy. And eventually it all caught up to her because Tommy filed for divorce, and Taylor also lost custody of her son. And honestly, she should have lost custody of both of her children. After her husband left her, Taylor started hooking up with a lot of random guys, which I don't care about, do whatever you want, but she would bring her 5-year-old daughter to these strangers' homes, just put them in a room while she went and hooked up with this guy that she did not know. And once again, Taylor was not single for long, and she married a man named Hunter Parker 11 days after divorcing Tommy. And she told Hunter the same old lies, that she was always sick, that her family was rich, but they were also evil, and she also told Hunter that her ex-husband Tommy was abusive. But she also told Hunter that she could still get pregnant because Hunter really wanted to have a family. She also just lied about a whole bunch of other stuff, but once Hunter found out that she was just like total liar, he divorced her as well. So now it's 2019. Taylor is 26 years old and she has a new boyfriend named Wade. And Taylor is still lying, and it's a lot of the same lies as before. So here are some of the lies that Taylor told Wade. Taylor told Wade that she was pregnant with twins, even though of course she was not. And Wade was so excited, and then he was really devastated because Taylor told him that she lost the babies. She also told Wade that she was from an extremely wealthy family and that one day she would inherit millions of dollars. So Taylor racked up almost $300,000 of credit card debt in Wade's name because it was no big deal, because one day she would pay it back. Taylor told Wade that her parents were really terrible, evil people, that they were in the mafia. She told Wade that her mom hired a hitman to kill her, and then that an FBI agent was tasked with personally protecting her. And then she said her mom was arrested, and then she said her mom died, and then she said that her mom faked her death and was actually still alive. And that's only a few of the lies that Taylor told Wade. There were a lot more. So after Taylor and Wade had been dating for about 6 months, because yes, all of that was only in 6 months, Wade started to get sick of Taylor and he wanted to break up with her. And then miraculously, Taylor was pregnant again. People in Taylor's life knew that she was a liar. They knew that she physically could not get pregnant anymore. And after a few months and she wasn't showing, people started getting really suspicious. So Taylor went on this real website called fakeababy.com. And she bought everything she needed, including a fake baby bump. She had a gender reveal party, her fake baby was a girl, her and Wade had a maternity photo shoot taken, and then when Taylor was 7 months pregnant, she starts coming up with her sinister plan. Taylor had done a variety of odd jobs throughout the years, and one of them was a photographer. Just a year earlier, she was the wedding photographer for this couple, Homer and Reagan. Taylor and Reagan stay friends on social media, and the one day Taylor is scrolling and she sees Reagan's pregnancy announcement. She's 6 months pregnant with a little baby girl. And Taylor starts relentlessly trying to form a deeper friendship with Reagan because they're both expecting baby girls around the same time. And then by the start of October of 2020, it's been 2 weeks since Taylor was supposed to give birth and she still did not have a baby. And people were straight up accusing her of faking this pregnancy, and it was getting so bad that her boyfriend Wade tried to come to her defense in this comment where he said that people thought that they were faking a pregnancy, and some people that he once called friends were gonna look real stupid when the baby came. On the day that Taylor was supposed to be induced at the hospital, she calls a threat to the hospital so that the entire hospital had to be evacuated. And then on the 8th of October, 3 weeks after Taylor's due date, she goes to her friend Reagan's house, who's still very much pregnant. Taylor brought Reagan gifts and coffees, and they hung out for a little bit, and afterwards Reagan even posted online about how much fun she had with her friend Taylor. She had no clue that her friend Taylor had a sinister plan to return the next day, murder her, and then steal her baby. Well, that next morning, Reagan's husband Homer starts getting some weird texts from his wife while he's at work. So he calls Reagan's mom and he asks her to go check on her. Reagan's mother finds her daughter in a horrific, brutal way that no parent should ever have to see. Her 21-year-old daughter laid dead on the floor and blood was everywhere. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter was locked in another room and she heard her mother being killed. Maybe even more disturbing than that, Reagan's baby had been cut from her womb and was gone. You're wondering where Taylor is. She's in her car driving like a maniac down the road, speeding, swerving, almost hitting people. A cop actually tries to pull over Taylor, but she does not pull over, and Taylor actually calls 911 and tells the operator to tell the police to leave her alone. Eventually, Taylor does pull over, and when the cop walks up to his car, he sees Taylor covered in blood, and there's a newborn baby in her lap, still attached to its umbilical cord. And Taylor tells the cop that she has just given birth to this baby on the side of the road. Taylor and the baby are taken to a hospital, not the closest hospital, because Taylor insisted on going to a hospital out of the state. The newborn baby girl was rushed to the ICU because she was in a critical condition and was barely breathing. And the hospital also wants to check on Taylor to make sure that she's okay because she says she's just given birth on the side of the road without medical attention. So the hospital staff gives Taylor an examination and they're shocked because this woman who claims that she just gave birth like an hour ago does not have a uterus. The police are there in the hospital and the doctor tells them that that baby did not come out of her.
What's your name?
Taylor Parker.
Taylor. Hey, my name's Chad Sansby. I'm a OSBI agent up here, and I heard you brought your baby in. Did you give birth on the side of the road or something?
Is there something wrong for them bringing me over here?
What did you have? Did you have a boy or a girl?
A girl.
A girl. Okay.
Did you have a name yet?
Clancy Gale.
I'm just going to be up front with you. I've been talking to the DA down in Bowie County, and they've been working on a case down there. And we know that you had a hysterectomy some time back, and that you claimed to be pregnant for a while, but that you really weren't. So we're trying to figure out where this baby came from. But you didn't give birth this morning.
What do you mean?
That's what I just said. You didn't give birth this morning. And we want to know where this baby came from. So what happened?
I just told y'all what happened.
Okay. What's the doctor going to find when he comes in and checks you? Is he going to find you just gave birth? They can tell. When he looks, he can tell in about a second.
So, it surely doesn't look like a baby came out of there. It doesn't look like she had a baby.
It doesn't?
No.
Okay.
Does not look like she had a baby there.
And eventually the police get word that a woman was found nearby murdered with her baby cut out of her.
You found a woman swimming inside her and her baby had been removed from her body. And then you show up with a baby. And the information is you've had a hysterectomy. There's no way you could have been pregnant. Even though you've been telling people for a while you've been pregnant. There's no way you could have been pregnant. And
I didn't hurt anybody on the side of the road.
well, I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying that there's a woman that had her baby removed from her body. Her body's found on the side of the road. I didn't say you did. I just want to know what happened, where this baby came from. Yeah, most of the people are going to assume the worst. They're going to assume you're an evil person. and that you just butchered this lady and left her to rot on the side of the road so you steal a baby. I don't think that was the case. I mean, you don't seem like that type of person, man.
I didn't kill anybody.
Where'd this baby come from? We're past all of that. Taylor, we're past that.
I did not kill anybody. I didn't kill anybody.
And Taylor tries to do what she does best, or at least all she knows. She tries to lie and lie and lie her way out of this. Taylor claimed that she was just at her friend Reagan's house. They were just hanging out, and then for no reason, Reagan got up and tried to attack her with a sharp object, and through the struggle, Reagan fell on the weapon. And that Reagan knew that she was about to die, so she begged her friend Taylor to perform a C-section to save her baby.
Yeah, when she hit her head, did you think she died? And you was trying to save the baby.
Yeah. And I really wanted the baby.
I understand that. That's okay. Well, and that shows what a good person you are. So you tried to save the baby so that you I guess you got the baby out of it. You like a C-section on it.
No, I did it. I don't know what's wrong with me. Because I've never been a bad person.
I don't think you are.
And the police are no dummies. They know this story makes absolutely no sense because at this point they already know that Taylor was faking a pregnancy, and Reagan had used her phone to search how to perform a C-section at 34 weeks, which is how far along Reagan was in her pregnancy. So Taylor was arrested. And I am very, very, very sad to tell you that Reagan's baby, Braxlyn Sage, did not make it. She passed away that same afternoon. Taylor just ruined so many lives for absolutely no reason. At her trial, she tried to plead not guilty, but so many people in her life testified against her. Her ex-husband Tommy, her ex-husband Hunter, her ex Wade, and her parents. It took about 1 hour for the jury to come back, and they found Taylor Parker guilty, and she was sentenced to death, making her the youngest woman in Texas on death row. This one really, really broke my heart, and I know it was such a long video, so if you guys made it to the end, thank you so much for listening to Reagan and Braxlyn's story. If you watched to the end of this really long video, thank you so much, and let me know somehow that you made it to the end by dropping like brown or orange emojis so I know that you made it to the end of this video. Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that suggested that I covered this case. I will see you guys all in my next video. Please have a very safe weekend, and please be a good person to your fellow person.
The largest corn maze in the world is 60 acres in Dixon, California, called the Cool Patch Pumpkins. And despite the fact that they give out maps of the maze and explicit instructions not to call 911, people continuously get lost for hours, panic, and then call 911. And this happens so much that the police don't even come and rescue them. They just call the maze owner and have them handle it.
She married her own dad, got pregnant with his baby, and that's not even the most shocking part of this crime case. I guarantee you this is one of the most disturbing cases you will hear all year. Katie Fusco was adopted at an early age. Now in 2016, she was actually living with her lovely adoptive parents in Dutchess County, New York. She was a really pretty girl, she was bright, she had loads going for her, but as she got older, she just had this niggling feeling in the back of her head, like she just wanted to know who her biological parents were, and that's totally understandable. And it really didn't actually take her long to find them at all, because by this point social media was pretty big. She was able to just get on Facebook and basically find them and start chatting to them. This was Alyssa and Stephen Paddle. Now they seemed like a nice normal couple to the outside world, and they were absolutely lovely to Katie when she started talking to them, so she had no reason to be concerned. She had absolutely no idea that the reason she was put up for adoption in the first place was because her dad was an absolute psycho. Stephen had been abusive towards both Katie when she was a baby and also Katie's mum. He'd even groomed Katie's mum when she was like 15 and got her pregnant. He would pinch Katie when she was a baby till she was black and blue, and at one point even tried to drown her. Katie, while she was just chatting to this biological family that she'd just reunited with, had no idea of any of this. So she ended up moving in with them pretty quickly. They actually had other daughters by this point. She moved in with the daughters, they were all plain happy families, it all seemed to be going okay. But Alyssa and Stephen's relationship, the mum and dad, was very strained, and they were actually already staying in separate bedrooms. So when Katie moved in, pretty quick she got very close with her dad, and her dad weirdly started sleeping on her bedroom floor. Then the biological dad and daughter started having a relationship. I'm pretty sure by this point Alyssa was so like abused and messed up in the head by the things that Stephen had done to her that she was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't take it. She was really at breaking point. She actually tried to warn Katie to stay away from her biological dad. She was like, you don't know what he truly is like, but Katie was already under his spell at this point. So Alyssa was like, enough is enough. I need this man out of my life, and she moved out. And Katie and Stephen carried on fine. They seemed very happy together, which is wild to say. Stephen was super happy with the new arrangement, even getting his daughters to call Katie their stepmom. He was like, she's your mum now. And as if things couldn't get any more messed up, Katie revealed to her now children/sisters that she was pregnant, and she didn't seem concerned about this at all. Her and Stephen seemed very, very happy. So this was wild. Honestly, this case just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So in July 2017, the pair actually got legally married, and they were able to do this by basically just not telling anyone that they were actually related and father and daughter. One of the craziest parts to me about this whole case is that people even attended this wedding like it was totally normal, including Katie's lovely adoptive parents. They were like there at the wedding cheering everything on. I'm like, why is nobody stopping this? It felt like the only person that was really totally dead against this was Alyssa, obviously, but by this point she'd moved out and she was kind of only being drip fed information. But she actually ended up phoning the police after all of this came out. She was like, do you know what? Enough is enough. They've got married. They've got a baby on the way. Like, this needs stopping. But this is not where this tragic case ends. You would think that the police would get involved, stop this whole mess, and they could start trying to rebuild normal lives, but no. Katie and Stephen got arrested due to incest, because obviously that is a very serious crime. They were banned from seeing each other. It was in their bail conditions. They were not allowed any kind of contact. Katie decided to move back in with her adoptive parents, the lovely ones, and it felt like she was getting her life back on track. She was having a little bit of a breather from Stephen. She was actually having her baby, hers and Stephen's baby, looked after by Stephen's mum. So in April 2018, Katie actually had a bit of almost like an epiphany of, this is really wrong. I actually need to cut all ties with Stephen, and she gave him a call to tell him to just end this once and for all. But Stephen was absolutely furious about this decision. No one could have ever predicted just how far he was about to go. On the 11th of April, he drove to his mum's house, which, remember, she's looking after their baby at this point, and he took his 7-month-old baby boy. Now, I don't know how he took the baby from his mum. He obviously just said he wanted to take him somewhere for a little bit, but he had a sick plan. He took the child, suffocated him to death, and then dumped the baby's tiny body in a wardrobe. But it wasn't over. He then drove to Wingdale in New York to Katie's house where she was living with her adoptive parents. And this was like a long drive. This was hours and hours. He had a lot of time to think this through. This wasn't just a spur of the moment thing, but he was determined. He eventually got there. He parked up outside Katie's house and just sat in wait and just stared at the house. And it's so chilling to think about. Waited and waited until Katie and the adoptive dad, Anthony, who actually was really lovely, left the property and got into a car. They had no idea Stephen was lurking, waiting to do the most sickening thing ever. So he starts following them in the car. He's following Katie's car. And the moment that they pause at a red traffic light, he swung his car door open, took out a weapon and shot them both dead. Stephen then got back into his own car, drove off for a bit, then called his poor unsuspecting mum and just admitted all of the sickening things that he had done before taking out his weapon again and turning it on himself.